I had looked at the Geronimo case 3 years ago and a couple of other times since, actually. But the truth is, he had tested positive for bovine TB. We do have to maintain consistency in our fight against TB. And at post-mortem, they did find TB-like lesions.
Well, you remember those horrible scenes when those idiot hazmat-suited DEFRA death squad went to Helen Mcdonald's farm. She's the owner of Geronimo, and dragged the poor creature away, screaming, fighting for its life, and then put him down, saying it had bovine TB, very infectious, very dangerous, dangerous for him, dangerous for all animals around him. We just heard George Eustace there, the Secretary of State, saying he did test positive twice for having that disease. Let's go over to animal welfare activist Dominic Dyer and Geronimo's owner, the alpaca's owner, Helen Mcdonald. Good evening.
Hello there.
Helen, as we just said, we just heard George Eustace say, well, he did test twice positive for bovine TB, but guess what? We found out he may well have somehow or other tested positive for that condition, but guess what? He didn't have it, as we all maintained all along.
Well, he didn't fail 2 positive TB tests. He produced an antibody response to an unvalidated antibody test. And he came from New Zealand, where there was 25 years confirmed no TB on the farm that he came from. They made up some rubbish in 2018 that he met a possum or caught it at a show in New Zealand in 2015, which was utter rubbish at the time. And interestingly, they were due to cull Geronimo in March 2018, and on receipt of a letter from the British Alpaca Society, which said that the test was not validated, the cull was cancelled without any explanation whatsoever. And then fast forward to August 2018, George Eustace sent me 2 letters full of the most appalling inaccuracies. And at that point, he clearly made a decision to pursue the death of my perfectly healthy alpaca to maintain the dogma and dishonesty that surrounds DEFRA TB policy. So everything he said is just not honest. It's just not true.
And we now know that we're not talking about evidence you have. This is DEFRA evidence from their post-mortem. The indications are that Geronimo definitely did not have bovine TB, as we'd always suspected all the way along, because if he had have had bovine TB, according to DEFRA, he'd have been the animal that survived the longest with having that condition in the history of animals, because he's supposed to have had it since about 2016. Which would be hard going, really, wasn't it? So everything that you told me, Helen, and you told me, Dominic, along the line, you were right and they were wrong. What is their reaction so far to this bombshell news that Geronimo was fine?
Well, we were right because we've always been honest, open and transparent, and we've always shared the evidence that we had. The evidence that I have has been published, which is the TB50 form and the pathology report, does not mention TB-like lesions. So I'd like to know where DEFRA, Eustace and their representative, which report were they reading when they came out with that rubbish on the 8th of September? Because it clearly is not apparent on the paperwork. They made it up, didn't they? And more lies.
Yeah, well, they seem to have a vested interest in putting Geronimo down at all costs. Something to do with once they've tested positive twice, we have to put all animals down. And as we were saying, while poor little Geronimo was still alive, all you were asking for, given the circumstances, could we have one more test? But it was like a computer says no situation, and they just wouldn't do it. Dominic, what's the next step? We're not going to let DEFRA get away with this, are we?
No, I think the whole situation is absurd, and Helen has been clear all the way along. And obviously there are legal issues and things that Helen is looking at in relation to what they've done to this healthy animal. But I think, they've been clutching at straws for weeks trying to make out that there could be TB. The fact is that there's no good evidence to prove that whatsoever. They can drag this on for a few more months to Christmas, trying to find some evidence to back up their rapidly eroding position. But the problem all along, and I've been talking with the BBC about this today, because Countryfile which, as you know, has a big audience, are finally getting their head around this, even at the BBC, that there's something very wrong here. We have TB, not being reduced in cattle. We have TB in alpacas, in llamas. We have hundreds of thousands of badgers being eradicated effectively, and this disease is not under control. And then you've got the Prime Minister, having been asked about this, who clearly doesn't have a clue about TB, starts going on about milk. That we've got to basically keep killing everything, because otherwise we might end up drinking TB milk. As no one told the Prime Minister, actually, we started pasteurizing milk in the 1930s. And there are very few cases of anyone getting TB from milk these days, unless they were drinking unpasteurized milk from cows. And there are some cases where some farmers have been consuming it from their own animals, but you could count those on your hand. So he obviously hasn't got a clue. The whole department at DEFRA doesn't have a clue what they're doing. But what they are doing is wasting hundreds of millions of pounds. They are letting down farmers because they're not giving them decent tests to find the disease in cattle. And they've got to get serious, as have the National Farmers Union, that if you want to eradicate TB, you've got to get it out of the cows. And that means you get a good test in there, and that means you're going to have to take down a lot of those herds with TB. But over time, you'll reduce the disease significantly. They don't want to do that. They'd rather kill badgers. They'd rather have inaccurate tests. They'd rather leave people like Helen in this terrible situation where they get their healthy animals dragged away for the only reason being to basically cover up the incompetence, negligence, and deceit within that department that's gone back decades. So it is becoming difficult. It is beginning to unravel, but we've got to keep the pressure on.
So, Helen, you must be peculiarly frustrated, as I was when I saw the Prime Minister when this was put to him only recently. What did you think about Geronimo? And he starts going, oh, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but we have to be careful. Bovine TB, he had tested positive twice. Well, we know that, but we can test those tests insofar as we say they gave us false positives due to the conditions in which those tests are done in. And all they keep doing, Helen, is repeating the same old mantra. I've tested twice, and the bovine TB is very, very dangerous. They won't allow us to get into their thick heads. Look, the point is he didn't have bovine TB.
And it's worse than that, Kevin, because the second test, they admitted to deviating from protocol to reassure me that the first test was actually positive. They made the test protocol up, which was for a confirmed TB breakdown, reduced basically put the harshest interpretation on that test, so they could interpret it as positive. It was a declining antibody picture to what essentially was a vaccinated animal at that point. So for Boris to come out and say it was a big, tough one, well, what is that? Is that covering up George Eustace's lies for the last 4 years? Or is it making the decision to kill a healthy animal in front of the entire planet to prove a point and stop me or anyone else from challenging a TB policy which is based on threats and does not have animal welfare at its heart? It's an absolute scandal. I'm disgusted and quite insulted by Boris Johnson's comments, and I would welcome the opportunity to go to 10 Downing Street and have a conversation with him.
What's your next step, Helen? It strikes me, apart from the death of poor Geronimo, there's a lot of emotional hardship for you. You've been through a terrible ordeal. The way they treated Geronimo when they came to take him away was also a massive scandal, I thought, ridiculous and rather sinister scenes unfolding at your farm there. My point is, I think you have a case for compensation. Are you going to sue DEFRA?
We're going to do everything that we can to get justice. I still don't know how he died. I believe he died suffocated and strangled in that horse box. And nobody will provide video or photographic evidence that that wasn't the case. I've now learned that apparently they took 3 head collars to my farm and not one of them entered my premises. And they did not use a head collar. And he died a traumatic death. He had blood in his lungs. So I need answers to that. But going forward, we're going to carry on. Geronimo is with me here in spirit on the farm. I am now able to look at his field without thinking of the crime that was committed that day. And he is with us in spirit, and we will fight on, and we will be questioning and challenging the government for as long as I have breath in my body, and as long as I have tens of thousands of supporters who witnessed that and are traumatized by it with nothing but derision, smirking, and disrespect from George Eustace. You know, where's my apology?
Exactly. And I think, Dominic, just to finish off, I mean, what happened to Geronimo is a sort of microcosm of what you and I have spoken about many times. The disconcerting feeling that the first resort of organizations like DEFRA, when it comes to animals like Geronimo, is to kill and then ask questions later. If we can just recalibrate the mindset of the authorities to not jump in first and destroy, but to think about these things a little more and not kill first, to think first before death, maybe we'll be getting somewhere.
Yeah, and just to accept that things have been done wrong. You know, in other areas of government, there's that they accept things have been done wrong, and you change policy. And this government's doing it every bloody day. But in DEFRA, it seems impossible for them to accept the badger calls a big crock of pile of manure and is not working, and is leading to the eradication of a protected species. 200,000 could be killed by the end of this year. That's an absolute national disgrace. That the TB testing system is not fit for purpose, and they're forcing tests on people like Helen to kill completely healthy animals. The whole thing stinks and it needs to change. And I think there has to be an acceptance that it's failing farmers, taxpayers, and wildlife. And that's what we've got to. And Helen's doing a great job of keeping the pressure on. And we'll all keep that pressure on as well, as you are, by just bringing us on tonight.
Well, you know, Helen and Dominic, I'm with you all the way. Justice for Geronimo. Keep up the good fight and keep us posted with all your progress. Thank you so much, both of you.